As Danielle mentioned today, we begin a new series, According to Jim. I was a fan of the TV show with that title, but that's not what these next 6 weeks are all about. We're going to be looking through a book in the Bible that's filled with many simple instructions I believe when followed will help us grow closer to Jesus. Now, I like simple instructions. Thinking of that today, I brought my car shade with me. Now, this is a pretty simple device, right? And it has the instructions written here on this flap. Now, here's what the instructions say. To avoid extreme heat buildup, place shade flush against windshield. Hold shade in place by lowering visors. And then my favorite instruction, remove shade before operating vehicle. It's there, okay? Now, aren't those good, clear instructions? Now, those are the kind of instructions I can follow. And I've yet to drive around the parking lot with this in place, right? So I follow the instructions. Now, book of James is filled with practical, useful instructions that, when followed, allow us to grow closer to Jesus. Now, I receive leadership tips via text each week. This is one that came in last week. Here's what it said. Spending time in the presence of God is the most important activity of our life. And I believe the things we're going to look at during the next 6 weeks will help us proactively step into the presence of God regularly and benefit in our lives and the lives of those around us. Today, according to Jim, genuine followership of Jesus has a very distinct appearance. We'll examine that truth by looking at James 1:26 through 27. All right, message part 2, listen to this. What James says, if anyone considers himself religious and yet does not keep a tight rein on his tongue, he deceives himself. His religion is worthless. Religion that God our Father accepts as pure and faultless is this, to look after orphans and widows in their distress and to keep oneself from being polluted by the world. Hey, genuine followership of Jesus has a very distinct appearance. Now, there's a huge industry in our world today that lurks in the underground. It's counterfeit goods. Clothing, shoes, electronics, computers, jewelry, movies, on the list goes, as people try to pass off fake items to unsuspecting people who want the real thing. Now, I recognize that when it comes to counterfeiting, if there's a counterfeit, it means there must be something that's real, right? I mean, counterfeit happens off of copying the real thing. Now, here's why I appreciate the instructions of James here, the simple instructions, as it shows what it constitutes to be. It constitutes to be a real follower of Jesus, that there is the real deal out there. There's plenty of counterfeits in the world. But James says, hey, the simple instructions, these are very simple ideas on how we can measure our progress against how we're living and putting into practice the things that will help us grow stronger and deeper with a spiritual faith and fervor that will impact ourselves and others. So what are the marks? Well, there's 3 that he mentions in these 2 little verses. The first is how we talk. Now, my question is, how can something so small cause such big trouble? You know what I'm talking about, don't you? I've seen it plenty of times in my own life. This thing springs out of control so quickly, right? In the 3rd chapter of James, he spends more time talking about the tongue. But here's the deal. The things that pour out of our talk are good indicators of the condition of our spiritual lives. So here's what he says again. If anyone considers himself religious and yet does not keep a tight rein on his tongue, his religion is worthless. So simply put here, if a person claims to know or follow Jesus, yet we don't watch what we say, our words show what's really going on in here. So I have some reins with me today. This is courtesy of Bruce Smolinski. Okay, he got these for me. I really wanted a horse, but Greg didn't think that'd be appropriate on stage. What can I say, right? Now, these are very interesting instruments. So you put the bit in the horse's mouth, all right, and put the bridle around that. And then these 2 things here control the horse. An 800 to 1,200 pound animal, you pull on one side, it goes left. You pull on this side, it goes right. It's incredible. You pull back, it stops, right? Now let me ask you a question. What happens if the rider of the horse does not hold on to the reins? What does the horse do? Where does the horse go? The horse goes anywhere the horse wants to go, right? If we don't hold the reins, the horse is on its own. Now, what happens if we don't keep a tight rein on our tongue? I think it's real simple. It goes wherever it wants to go. And that's not to say we don't control what we say, right? But it can be highly destructive. Have you ever thought, why did I say that? There are times when Darla and I get a little testy with each other. Now, most of the time, the issue is something I've done or said. I'll be honest, okay? But she'll say something back to me, and immediately a snappy, quippy retort comes to my mind. And it's something that would dig a little bit, or maybe hurt a little bit. And almost every time that little voice says in my head, just because you're thinking it doesn't mean it needs to come out. Right? Now here's the deal, guys. I have never regretted putting a rein on my tongue. I have many regrets for times I just let her fly. I thought about how you rein the tongue in. Really, it's two ways. One's what not to say. There are all kinds of things that fall into this category. It could be inappropriate talk, cutting people down, making fun of them, talking against people, calling names. We've seen that in the media from our political leaders. Gossip, words designed to hurt or damage your reputation. Swearing, critical talk, complaining. Hey, the list goes on, doesn't it? I say this little instrument here that we all have really can cause some trouble. And it also harm us if we choose to indulge and not rein. But there are also the things we should be saying. The encouraging words that build people up and help them see beyond themselves. I had a chance to practice this with a guy on Monday that I think could be a church planter. I told him, buddy, I see this and I think you could plant. And you could see all of a sudden, maybe I could. I like encouraging words. I like to give encouraging words. I think it's a needed component in many people's lives, and it's easy to give them. Okay? There are words that point people forward. I was in a meeting with another guy, a conversation with a friend of mine who's going through a real tough time in ministry. He was worn out. He was unappreciated. And things just aren't going well. He's not in a good place. And I didn't want to pile on him. But I did know he needed some words that were to the point. I just told him, I said, buddy, this is not a good place for you. I think you need to exit this ministry for your own good and your own health. And here's why. And I just laid out some things. As we were walking out the door, he just said this to me. He said, thank you for being a friend. I said, well, what do you mean? He said, because you didn't tell me what I needed, what I wanted to hear. You told me what I needed to hear. You told me the truth. And then there's complimentary talk. I mean, everyone wants to know they're making a difference, right? And what we say and how we say it can determine how people feel about themselves. If you ever have a question about this, practice it with a waiter or waitress or a cashier at the grocery store and compliment them and just see what happens. You see, if we want to check the health of our followership of Jesus, much of it can be done with a simple look at the words we normally use. Okay? Now, all of us have off days. Okay? I had to apologize, I think it was 2 weeks ago, a week and a half ago, to a friend of mine because I got into a negative talk, a complaining pattern for a time in a day. And so I called her up. I said, listen, I'm sorry about that. That's not me. We don't want to drag other people down. We want to lift them up, right? But if we want to evaluate our lives, we need to consider our normal pattern for the use of this little item here. The second thing is, who do we protect? Now, there is a genuine pattern for following Jesus that James details in verse 27. And it begins with a statement. religion that God our Father accepts as pure and faultless is this. Now, those are the kind of words that make you want to listen, okay? Okay, if I want a pure and faultless religion, a following of Jesus, what is it? Well, James says this. He says, it's to look after widows and orphans in their distress. Huh. That sounds pretty simple. As I was working on this message, I happened to look at a video of a young man whose father was a police officer. The officer died 12 years ago while running the Chicago Marathon. The boy was 6 years old when this happened. And the video was the story of what happened at this young man's high school graduation 12 years later. So he got the idea to invite the officers who had stood by his family early on after his dad died, to invite them to his party. And his mom on the video said, man, I didn't know I didn't know if any of the guys would come. She said, it's been a while, and they're all busy. It was a Friday night. So much to her surprise and to the delight of her son, 18 officers showed up at the party in full uniform, squad cars, flashing lights to let the young man know they were coming. And I'll be honest, as I watched that video, I cried. A squad car after squad car pulled into this young man's driveway. And I know what part of it was. I have a son who's a police officer and a grandson who's 7, okay? I mean, I know what it was. But I thought, what a beautiful picture of taking care of widows and orphans in their distress. You see, they showed up. So what does that mean for us? Well, a couple weeks ago, we had a raffle. And I bought some tickets. I really didn't think I was going to win the 2 rocking chairs, and I didn't, of course. Okay? But I knew the money was going to help people in Nicaragua, right? And that was a good benefit. Now, all he did there was give some money, right? That's all it was. The words, when it says to look after widows and orphans, the word look after talks about being there, showing up, flesh on flesh. Now, we've got a team down in Nicaragua this week and next week who are showing up to help people in that country with a variety of ministry opportunities. They've shown up. I'm grateful that they're down there helping. Now, not all of us can show up in Nicaragua, but there are many ways and many opportunities for us to show up right where we are to help people out. I think of the ministry done for Huff Elementary School, right here in our region. We show our help, our support, and many show up. You see, nothing quite makes a difference like presence, being there. A couple weeks ago, I was talking to someone about sort of pointing my ministry with Ignite. This woman has been a friend of mine for many years. She and her husband were once attended the church I pastored in Mantino. 2 years ago, her husband passed away, and so we met to talk about Ignite 2 weeks ago. But as we were talking, I realized she was lonely. She was lonely. So we sat at Starbucks for 2 hours talking about family, about the church she goes to, about decisions she needs to make. Now, I don't spend a lot of time with widows and orphans on purpose. But I do know that time with her that day helped her. Because nothing quite makes a difference like our presence does. See, it's a simple step. For any of us who want to strengthen and deepen our walk with Jesus, we need to show up for people in distress. See, most of the time it's just being there to give time and attention to people. People who need to know they're valued and wanted. In Bible times, widows and orphans were viewed as throwaway people. I hate to say it that way, but that's the way it was. They were just throwaway. They were not valued at best. At best, they were marginalized. But James is telling us here, hey, people, friends, go to the margins. Go to the margins and show up. And when we do this, we show who we follow by what we do. And then there's the third step. The third step is what we allow in. Now, we talked about this a couple of weeks ago. We talked about guarding our hearts. But there's something beneficial about repetition in this area because there's so many things trying to infiltrate, all right? It's not just a matter of what we pour out of our lives and who we focus our attention on. We need to keep pollution out. As James put it, here's what we said, keep yourself from being polluted by the world. Now, what does pollution look like? Well, I like brownies. Okay? Brownies are easy to make. Okay? They're quick to bake. And eating a brownie right out of the oven, well, there's just something that's very satisfying about a nice warm brownie, isn't there? So, I'm going to get some brownies ready for somebody today. I'm not going to cook them, but I'm just going to mix them up. So, here's what I got. Brownie mix. As you can tell, I do a lot of cooking at home. I can almost open the package. There we go. Okay, so there's the mix. Now, I've got a special additive that I want to put into this. It's deep and it's rich. Okay. Okay. Yeah. Okay. It looks very chocolatey. Okay, so let's put 2 scoops of this substance in here, okay? And then we'll mix it around. Now, whoever wants this afterwards, come up. Now, anybody want to know what my deep, rich, chocolatey mix is? It's potting soil. Whoever wants this afterwards, please just come up and get it, okay? Come up and get it. It's yours, okay? Now, remember the filter? We talked about what we keep out of our lives, right? A couple weeks ago. Now, anybody want this? Of course not. Who wants dirt brownies, right? We wouldn't put that in our mouths. The reality is, though, the pollution many of us are presented with are much more subtle than potting soil. But it's no less disturbing than dirt in the mix, right? Because the stuff we're polluted with infiltrates with the seepage that can go undetected in an unguarded life. Last year, Darla and I went to a play at Drury Lane. It was a well-known play, and I'd heard about it many. It had been years and years long going. And I wondered about the subject as I was sitting there reading the playbill. It was all about a dysfunctional family. I know this could be interesting or disturbing. And we watched the first half, and the relational interactions of the family members and the language that was used were disturbing, to say the least, and troubling, okay? So I looked at Darla when intermission came. I said, well, what do you think? She looked at me and said, I don't like this at all. I said, no. I instead of being entertained, I think I'm being assaulted. And so we left. Now, I wasn't going to become what I was watching on stage. I wasn't going to let that kind of language seep out of me. But it just didn't feel right to have that coming at me. Here's the thing I think I recognize. When we feel something we're letting into life isn't good for us, it's a pretty good indicator that it's not good for us. I mean, that's what the Holy Spirit does for us, right? He guides us. Religion that is the real deal is characterized by refusing to let pollutants into our lives freely. And when we see the dirt approaching, we just need to say no. I've been reading in my morning Bible reading in 1 Timothy and 2 Timothy, and one of the things that comes through in that pretty clearly, the writer says, Paul says several times, says, flee from things that are wrong, pursue things that are good. But he says that over and over again, flee from bad, pursue what is good. And so I think what I realize there is when I see the bad approaching, I just need to run. Because the bad can't keep up with somebody who's running. Now, we all have different strengths and different points of weaknesses, no matter who we are. The pollutants that draw my attention may not draw yours. But please note that we all have pollutants seeking entry into our lives. And the best way to grow our followership of Jesus is to keep the pollutants away so we can be free. Now I'm going to stop here. I love simple instruction. I really do. And when we practice these 3 components, I think our followership of Jesus grows stronger, deeper, and richer, and is seen much more clearly. When people recognize there's a difference in our lives, and they will ask us why. Why? are you different? And it gives a perfect opportunity to tell them, it's because I try to follow Jesus. Do we get it right all the time? Heavens no. Heavens no. But it's where we're pointing that makes the difference. So here's my challenge for you this week. Now, I'm going to be back next week. I'd love to hear stories of how you've worked the challenge, okay? So here's the challenge. One, take inventory of your life. Take inventory of what's coming in. Do you have relationships that are toxic? Media that's bringing wrong message? Habits that are damaging your walk? I've got a couple things I've listed out myself. I'm going to work on one of them this week. Okay? Just one. And that'd be my challenge to you. Pick one, and just work on keeping it out. And when it approaches, run. Run. You're not running in fear. You're running because you know you don't want that in. Secondly, who around you needs someone to show up for them? We all have people. We all have people. People in distress. Maybe they're people on the margins. I don't know who's in your life. I've got a couple I'm thinking of. Maybe is there a widow who needs your help? Are there orphans you can reach? I don't know. But are there people around you right now in distress who just need someone to show up in their lives? Will you do it? And the third thing I want to ask you to do is something I'm going to be doing during the month of July. Tomorrow, July 1st starts. There are 31 days in the month of July. There are 31 chapters in a book in the Old Testament called Proverbs. Great book of wisdom. The wisest man who ever lived wrote the book. And so I'm going to ask you to do, I'm going to do this during the month of July. If you want to join me, I'd love to have it, and I'd love to come tell me what you're learning, what you're hearing from the Lord as you read. Read a chapter a day. And just see what happens. See what happens. Because I know what, when we make margins for the presence of God and spending time in his presence, he always shows up. Always. And I'm glad you're here today. You're here because you want to grow a relationship with Jesus. A genuine relationship. Now, or maybe you're here and you're wondering if there is such a thing as a genuine relationship. Well, I'm here to tell you. James tells us, yes, there is. And yes, he says, you can find it and grow in it. Let me pray for you today. Father, I thank you for the opportunity to be together with my friends. I'm thankful for the beauty of your word and the things we can learn from your word. Father, there are those who are wondering here today if there is such a thing as a relationship with you. I just pray to help them to see that there is. And bring them across the paths of somebody right here today who can help them see there is such a thing as a real relationship with Jesus. Father, if there's those who are seeking a deeper walk, I just pray that we'll help each of us to dig into you, to fight the things that are seeking infiltration, and Lord, to show up for somebody who needs us to show up for them. Because we'll have a chance to not only see you at work, we'll have an opportunity to show you at work. Thank you for Jesus. It's in his name we pray.